Imagine being told that you would never amount to much, that you asked too many questions, that you were too restless to learn. That school simply wasn't for someone like you. For most children, those words might have become a lifelong burden. For one boy, they became the beginning of an extraordinary story. His name was Thomas Alva Edison. He was born on February 11, 1847, in the small town of Milan, Ohio, before moving with his family to Port Huron, Michigan while still a young child. From the very beginning, Thomas seemed different. He was endlessly curious. Everything fascinated him. Why did birds fly? How did machines work? What made fire burn? Questions poured from him faster than adults could answer them. But curiosity did not fit neatly inside the classroom. When Edison entered school, he struggled to adapt to its rigid structure. He found it difficult to sit still, often drifted into his own thoughts, and constantly interrupted lessons with questions. After only a few months of formal education, his teacher reportedly described him as addled, a 19th-century term suggesting that he was slow or unable to learn. The exact wording has been debated by historians, but what is clear is that his teacher believed he was unsuited to the classroom. His mother, Nancy Edison, refused to accept that judgment. A former schoolteacher herself, she withdrew Thomas from school and chose to educate him at home. It was a decision that changed history. Instead of forcing him to memorize lessons, she encouraged him to read widely, think independently, and satisfy his endless curiosity. Their home became his classroom. Its basement became his laboratory. Books became his teachers. Before long, young Thomas was conducting his own experiments with chemicals, collecting unusual objects, and trying to understand the hidden rules that governed the world around him. Not every experiment ended well. Some filled the house with strange smells. Others created small explosions. But failure never discouraged him. If anything, it made him even more curious. Without realizing it, Edison was developing a habit that would define the rest of his life. Whenever something didn't work, he didn't see failure. He saw another question waiting to be answered. That relentless curiosity would soon carry him far beyond the walls of his family home. And before long, a teenage boy with little formal education would find himself working at the center of one of the fastest-growing technologies of the 19th century. Thank you for coming back to Ashes in the Past. If our stories have earned a place in your watch list, I'd be honored if you subscribed and joined us for many more journeys through history. Now, let's begin today's story. By the time Thomas Edison reached his teenage years, his classroom had become the real world. At just 12 years old, he began working on the trains that ran between Port Huron and Detroit. Day after day, he walked through crowded passenger cars selling newspapers, candy, fruit, and magazines to travelers. It was demanding work. But to Edison, it was also an opportunity. Instead of spending every dollar he earned, he invested much of it in books, scientific equipment, and chemicals for his experiments. His curiosity had become an obsession. He even persuaded the railroad company to let him set up a small laboratory inside the baggage car of one of the trains. Between stops, he conducted experiments whenever he had a spare moment. The arrangement lasted only until one of those experiments went terribly wrong. A bottle of phosphorus accidentally ignited, starting a fire inside the train. The laboratory was thrown off the carriage. So was Edison. For many people, that would have marked the end of an unusual hobby. For Edison, It was simply another lesson. Around the same time, another event changed the course of his life forever. One day, while waiting at a railway station, Edison noticed a young boy wandering onto the tracks directly in front of an approaching freight train. Without hesitation, he sprinted forward, grabbed the child, and pulled him to safety just moments before the train rushed past. The boy's father, J.U. Mackenzie, was the station master. Deeply grateful, he offered Edison something far more valuable than money. He taught him how to operate the telegraph. In the mid-19th century, the telegraph was the internet of its age. Messages that once took days or weeks to deliver could now travel hundreds of miles in just minutes using electrical signals sent through wires. For Edison, it was a revelation. Here was a machine that transformed invisible electricity into communication. He was captivated. Over the next several years, Edison traveled from city to city working as a telegraph operator. The job demanded precision, speed, and long hours, often through the night. But every new station also became another classroom. Whenever his shift ended, he dismantled equipment, studied electrical circuits, and searched for ways to improve the machines around him. Most operators were content to send messages. Edison wanted to reinvent the entire system. The telegraph was no longer just his occupation. It had become the gateway to a much larger dream. Soon, the young telegraph operator would stop repairing other people's inventions and begin creating inventions of his own. By the late 1860s, Thomas Edison had reached an important decision. He no longer wanted to spend his life operating machines. He wanted to build them. Leaving behind the life of a telegraph operator, Edison devoted himself entirely to invention. It was a risky choice. He had little money, no university education, no wealthy investors waiting to support him. All he possessed was an endless curiosity and an unwavering belief that every problem had a solution, if someone was willing to search long enough. His early years as an inventor were anything but glamorous. Many of his ideas failed. Some inventions attracted no buyers. Others worked perfectly but solved problems that few people actually had. Each failure cost him time, money, and confidence. Yet Edison refused to see failure as defeat. To him, every unsuccessful experiment eliminated one more wrong answer. Every mistake brought him a little closer to the right one. His persistence finally paid off in 1869. Edison developed an improved version of the stock ticker, a machine that rapidly transmitted stock market prices to brokers and financial firms. The invention proved so valuable that one company purchased the rights for $40,000, an enormous sum at the time, equivalent to well over $1 million today. For the first time in his life, Thomas Edison had financial freedom. Most people would have retired comfortably. Edison did the opposite. He invested nearly all of the money into building workshops, hiring skilled machinists, and purchasing better equipment. His goal was no longer to invent one successful product. He wanted to invent continuously. This idea was revolutionary. Until then, most inventors worked alone, experimenting in small workshops or home laboratories. Edison envisioned something entirely different. A place where talented people from different backgrounds could work together, testing hundreds of ideas at the same time. A factory for invention itself. Within a few years, that vision became reality. In the quiet village of Menlo Park, New Jersey, Edison built what many historians consider the world's first industrial research laboratory. It quickly became known as the place where impossible ideas became possible. Reporters flocked to witness strange new machines. Investors eagerly awaited each new breakthrough. The young man once dismissed as unsuited for school had become one of America's most promising inventors. But his greatest challenge still lay ahead. The world after sunset remained lit by candles, oil lamps, and gaslights. Dangerous, dim, and unreliable. Thomas Edison believed he could change that. The race to light the world was about to begin. By the 1870s, the world was ready for a better source of light. Homes relied on candles that flickered in the slightest breeze. Oil lamps filled rooms with smoke and unpleasant odors. Gaslights illuminated city streets, but they carried the constant risk of fire and explosion. Electric light was not a new idea. Several inventors had already demonstrated incandescent lamps. The problem was that they burned out too quickly, consumed too much electricity, or were simply too expensive for everyday use. Edison believed the challenge was not merely to invent a light bulb. It was to create one that ordinary families could actually use. At Menlo Park, the laboratory became a place of relentless experimentation. Day and night, Edison and his team tested one material after another for the tiny filament inside the bulb. Cotton, linen, paper, wood, even fibers from exotic plants collected from around the world. Each new material promised hope. Most failed. Some burned too brightly. Others burned for only a few minutes before breaking apart. The failures mounted into the hundreds, then the thousands. Visitors often questioned whether Edison was wasting his time. According to a famous story, whose exact wording cannot be verified, someone asked how it felt to fail so many times. Edison is widely credited with replying, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Whether he said those exact words or not, they perfectly reflected his approach to invention. Each unsuccessful experiment revealed another path that could be crossed off the list. Failure was not the opposite of progress. It was part of the process. Finally, in October 1879, after countless experiments, Edison and his team produced a carbon filament lamp that burned for many hours, long enough to be commercially practical. News spread rapidly. Crowds traveled to Menlo Park just to witness the astonishing sight of electric lights glowing steadily through the night. Newspapers around the world hailed Edison as the man who had conquered darkness. But the light bulb itself was only one piece of a much larger puzzle. A lamp without electricity was little more than a glass ornament. If electric lighting was truly going to replace gas and oil, someone would have to build an entire system capable of delivering power safely to homes, businesses, and entire cities. And Edison intended to do exactly that. Inventing a practical light bulb was an extraordinary achievement. But Thomas Edison knew it would never change the world on its own. A single bulb could not illuminate a city. It needed electricity. And electricity needed an entire network. This was the challenge that truly set Edison apart from many inventors of his time. He did not think in terms of individual inventions. He thought in terms of complete systems. If families were going to replace candles and gas lamps with electric light, they would need generators to produce electricity, power stations to distribute it, miles of underground wiring to carry it, meters to measure its use, switches, sockets, safety devices, and reliable bulbs that all worked together. No such system existed. So Edison and his team set out to build one from the ground up. It was one of the most ambitious engineering projects of the 19th century. After years of planning and experimentation, their efforts culminated in 1882 with the opening of the Pearl Street Station in Lower Manhattan. It became one of the world's first central power stations designed to supply electricity to multiple customers. At first, it powered only a few city blocks. But for those living there, the change was remarkable. With the flip of a switch, homes and businesses were illuminated without smoke, open flames, or the constant need to replace candles. The modern electrical age had begun. Soon, electric lighting spread to factories, hotels, offices, theaters, and streets. Businesses could operate long after sunset. Factories became safer and more productive. Cities slowly transformed into places that never truly slept. Edison had done more than invent a better lamp. He had changed the rhythm of everyday life. Yet his imagination was far from exhausted. Light was only one way electricity and technology could reshape the world. What if people could preserve sound, replay voices long after they had been spoken, or capture moving images for future generations? To many, these ideas sounded impossible. To Thomas Edison, they were simply the next problems waiting to be solved. And before long, the world would begin calling him by a remarkable new name: the Wizard of Menlo Park. By the early 1880s, Thomas Edison had become one of the most famous men in the world. Newspapers eagerly reported his latest experiments. Visitors traveled from across America and Europe to tour his laboratory at Menlo Park, hoping to catch a glimpse of the inventor who seemed capable of turning imagination into reality. Before long, the press gave him a nickname that would follow him for the rest of his life: the Wizard of Menlo Park. But there was no magic inside his laboratory. Only relentless work. Edison often spent entire days, and sometimes nights, experimenting alongside his team. Long tables overflowed with wires, gears, batteries, chemicals, and half-finished prototypes. Every corner of the laboratory reflected one simple belief: there was always a better way. One of his most astonishing inventions came even before the practical light bulb. In 1877, Edison introduced the phonograph, the world's first machine capable of recording and playing back sound. For the first time in human history, a person's voice could outlive the moment in which it was spoken. The public was amazed. Some believed it was a trick. Others called it a miracle. Edison simply called it another invention. His laboratory continued producing breakthroughs at an extraordinary pace. He improved the telephone so voices could be heard more clearly over long distances. He developed better electrical generators. He helped advance early motion picture technology, creating devices that allowed people to view moving photographs one frame at a time. Though many inventors contributed to the birth of cinema, Edison's laboratories played a major role in bringing motion pictures to the public. What truly distinguished Edison was not just the number of patents he earned, eventually more than 1,000 in the United States alone. It was the way he reinvented invention itself. Instead of relying on a lone genius working in isolation, he built teams of engineers, chemists, machinists, mathematicians, and designers who collaborated under one roof. Ideas were shared. Experiments were repeated. Failures were analyzed. Success became a collective effort. This model would later inspire the research laboratories of companies around the world, from industrial giants of the 20th century to the technology firms of today. Yet fame brought new challenges. As electricity spread across America, another brilliant inventor emerged with a different vision for the future. Their disagreement would grow into one of the most famous technological rivalries in history, a conflict remembered as the War of the Currents. As electricity spread across cities and towns, a debate emerged that would shape the future of the modern world. Thomas Edison believed that direct current, or DC, was the safest and most practical way to deliver electricity. DC worked well over short distances. It powered the electrical systems Edison had spent years building. But it had one major limitation. Electricity weakened quickly as it traveled, requiring power stations to be built every few miles. Then another approach began attracting attention. Alternating current, or AC, could carry electricity much farther with far less loss. It was championed by inventor Nikola Tesla, whose system was later backed commercially by George Westinghouse. The disagreement soon became known as the War of the Currents. It was more than a technical debate. It became a battle of business strategies, patents, public opinion, and competing visions for the future. Edison fiercely defended DC. He publicly argued that AC was more dangerous because of its higher voltages, even supporting demonstrations intended to highlight its risks. These actions remain among the most controversial chapters of his career and have shaped how many people remember him today. In the end, history favored AC for large-scale electrical distribution. Its efficiency made it the better choice for transmitting power across long distances, and it became the standard used throughout most of the world. For Edison, it was a rare defeat. But it did not erase what he had already accomplished. He had transformed the light bulb into a practical technology. He had pioneered centralized electrical power systems. He had created one of the first industrial research laboratories. He had helped lay the foundations of the recording industry and early motion pictures. More importantly, he had changed the way innovation itself was organized. Future inventors would no longer have to work alone in small workshops. Research teams, laboratories, and systematic experimentation would become the engine of technological progress. By the time Thomas Edison grew old, the world looked nothing like the one into which he had been born. Cities glowed after sunset. Factories hummed with electric power. Voices could be recorded. Moving pictures entertained millions. The curious boy once dismissed by his teacher had helped reshape modern civilization. But perhaps his greatest invention was not a machine at all. It was a way of thinking. A way that continues to inspire inventors, scientists, and dreamers to this very day. When Thomas Edison died on October 18, 1931, the world paused. Newspapers across the globe honored the man whose inventions had transformed everyday life. In the United States, millions of people participated in a nationwide tribute for one symbolic minute. Many communities dimmed or switched off their electric lights. It was a simple gesture. A brief moment of darkness. A reminder of how different the world had been before one inventor dedicated his life to chasing impossible ideas. Today, it is easy to take Edison's achievements for granted. We flip a switch without thinking about the network behind it. We record voices with devices that fit inside our pockets. We watch moving images every day. We assume that research laboratories, engineering teams, and constant innovation are simply how progress happens. But in Edison's time, much of that had yet to exist. His greatest contribution was never just a light bulb, or a phonograph, or a motion picture camera. It was something much larger. He proved that invention could become a disciplined process, that extraordinary breakthroughs did not have to depend on sudden flashes of genius. They could be built through relentless experimentation, careful observation, collaboration, and the willingness to fail again and again until the right answer appeared. Thomas Edison held 1,093 U.S. patents, more than almost any inventor in American history. Yet perhaps his most enduring legacy cannot be counted by patents alone. It can be seen in every research laboratory searching for a cure, every engineer designing the next generation of technology, every entrepreneur solving problems that others believe are impossible, and every curious child asking one more question than everyone else. The boy who left school after only a few months, the teenager who sold newspapers on trains, the young inventor who failed thousands of times before succeeding, did not simply invent devices. He helped build the modern world. His life reminds us that success is rarely reserved for those who never fail. It belongs to those who refuse to stop learning, who refuse to stop questioning, and who refuse to let temporary failure become a permanent conclusion. Thomas Edison once observed, "Opportunity is missed by most people because it is dressed in overalls and looks like work." Whether in science, business, or everyday life, progress has always belonged to those willing to keep experimenting long after others have given up. And perhaps that is the brightest light Thomas Edison ever left behind.